What would you do if your child whispered the one sentence that shattered your heart, and it wasn't meant for you? When a millionaire father overheard his grieving daughter call another woman mom, everything he thought he knew about love, family, and healing was turned upside down. This isn't just a story. It's a quiet storm that will stay with you long after the final word. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. It helps us keep sharing powerful real-life stories that truly matter. Also, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The house stood on a hill above the city, tall windows reflecting the sunset like glass eyes that never blinked. It was the kind of place that made people stop and stare. 5 bedrooms, marble floors, art on the walls that no one ever looked at. But inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from something missing. Jonathan Reese sat at the edge of his bed, still in the suit he had worn the day before. The jacket was wrinkled. The tie hung loose around his neck. He stared at the floor, unmoving, like the furniture around him. It had been 46 days since his wife Melanie died. 46 days since the call came from the hospital. She had collapsed while jogging. Sudden, unstoppable. And Jonathan had been in Berlin, closing a major deal. He had made it back in time for the funeral, but not in time to say goodbye. Down the hall, a smaller room painted in soft yellows and blues held his 6-year-old daughter Elise. The wallpaper had stars and moons. Her bookshelf was full, her toys untouched. She hadn't spoken a full sentence in over a week. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply stopped, like a toy whose batteries had been quietly removed. Jonathan didn't know what to do. He had built a company from scratch. He knew how to hire, fire, invest, expand. He knew how to lead meetings with world leaders. But this was a kind of problem he couldn't fix with strategy. So he stayed quiet. He sat in meetings during the day and sat in silence at night, hoping time would heal what he couldn't. Elise's school principal finally stepped in. She needs more than a sitter, Mrs. Ullman had said during their call. She needs someone who understands loss, someone who can meet her where she is. And so, on a rainy Tuesday, Tessa Hart arrived. She wasn't what Jonathan expected. She wore simple clothes, a navy sweater and jeans, and carried a small canvas bag. Her smile was warm, but not overly cheerful. She had the calm energy of someone who had seen pain and decided not to be afraid of it. "Thank you for coming," Jonathan said when he opened the door. "Thank you for trusting me." Tessa replied. She didn't comment on the house, didn't ask about his work. She simply asked, "Where's Elise?" Jonathan led her to the child's room. Elise sat on the floor, surrounded by puzzle pieces that had been pulled from the box but not placed. She looked up briefly, then turned away. Tessa knelt. "Hi, Elise," she said gently. "I'm Tessa. I came to spend time with you. We don't have to talk if you don't want to. We can just sit." And they did. Jonathan watched from the hallway, confused. He expected Tessa to ask questions, to try to cheer Elise up. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor in silence, her hands resting quietly in her lap. After 20 minutes, Tessa hummed softly. It wasn't a song Jonathan recognized, just a simple, wordless melody, like something a mother might hum while folding laundry. Jonathan walked away. He didn't want to listen. He didn't want to feel whatever that sound stirred in him. That night, Elise ate half her dinner. It was the most she had eaten in days. Jonathan watched her carefully. "How was your day?" he asked. She didn't respond. But she didn't leave the table either. Tessa, who had joined them at Jonathan's request, gave a small smile. "I saw a bluebird in the garden," she said casually. "It looked cold. I left out some seeds. Maybe he'll come back tomorrow." Elise glanced up, just for a second. Later, after bedtime, Jonathan found himself standing outside his daughter's room. He didn't know why. He hadn't done that since Melanie died. But tonight, he stayed. Through the thin space between the door and the frame, he heard Tessa's voice. "Sometimes, when someone you love leaves, it feels like everything stops working," she said softly. "But even then, your heart keeps beating. That means it's okay to still be here, to feel things, even the sad things." Jonathan pressed his hand to the doorframe. His throat ached. His eyes burned. Then, "Something happened," Elise whispered, just loud enough for Tessa to hear. "I miss her." Tessa didn't rush to comfort her. She didn't tell her everything would be okay. She simply said, "I know." "Me too." And the silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something fragile and real. A beginning. Jonathan stepped back quietly, heart pounding. That night, he didn't pour a drink. He didn't check his email. He sat in the living room and stared at the puzzle pieces on the coffee table that Elise had left behind. And for the first time in 46 days, he wondered if maybe they could be okay again. The sun peeked through the curtains in Elise's room, casting soft lines across her face. She was curled in bed, her arms wrapped around a worn stuffed rabbit. Jonathan stood in the hallway, just out of view, unsure if he should enter. For the past week, mornings had been delicate. He never knew if Elise would speak, cry, or just stare at him with those wide, unreadable eyes. Tessa arrived at exactly 8 a.m., like she had every day since that rainy Tuesday. Jonathan was starting to expect her knock like clockwork. It wasn't loud, just a soft tap-tap that somehow settled the air in the house. "Good morning," she said as she walked in, brushing raindrops off her coat. "You're always on time," Jonathan said, attempting a smile. "Routine helps kids feel safe," she replied. "And honestly, it helps me too." They shared a quiet moment before Tessa walked toward Elise's room. Jonathan stayed behind, but he listened. He always listened. "Elise," Tessa said gently, "today's a new day. That bird we saw yesterday might come back. Do you want to help me check?" No answer at first. Then, the soft rustling of blankets. A quiet okay. It was only one word, but it felt like music. Later that morning, the phone rang. Jonathan glanced at the screen. It was Riverside Elementary. His heart jumped. Schools didn't call just to say hello. "Mr. Reese," came a kind voice. "This is Nurse Darlene from Elise's school. There's been a small accident." Jonathan's world narrowed to a pinpoint. "Is she okay?" "Physically, yes," Nurse Darlene replied. "She fell on the playground trying to reach a bird stuck in the fencing. She's got a scrape and a bump, but she's asking for you." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Jonathan said, already grabbing his keys. When he arrived, the school smelled like crayons and hand sanitizer. The nurse's office was small, with posters of smiling cartoon organs on the walls. Elise sat on a plastic chair, her knees swinging above the floor. A bandage crossed her forehead. Her eyes were red, but not from pain. Jonathan knelt in front of her. "Hey, Ugh, what happened?" Elise's lip trembled. "The bird was stuck. Mommy would have helped. I wanted to help like she would." Jonathan's heart broke all over again. Not because of the scrape, but because his little girl was trying to fix things she couldn't understand. "You did your best," he said, brushing hair from her face. Nurse Darlene stood nearby, quiet and observant. Then, gently, she spoke. "Elise said something earlier. I wasn't sure if I should repeat it, but she whispered to me, 'I wish Tessa was my mom.'" Jonathan felt the words hit him in the chest, not with anger, not even surprise, just a deep, aching sorrow. "Thank you for telling me," he said, voice low. The drive home was silent. Elise stared out the window, her small hands folded in her lap. Jonathan couldn't stop hearing those words over and over. "I wish Tessa was my mom. He knew Melanie could never be replaced, and he never wanted her to be. But maybe Elise wasn't looking for a replacement. Maybe she was just searching for someone who made her feel safe again. That evening, after dinner, Jonathan found Tessa in the kitchen rinsing dishes. Her sleeves were rolled up. The radio played quietly from the corner. "Can we talk?" he asked. Tessa turned off the tap and looked at him, sensing something serious. "Of course." He leaned against the counter, unsure how to begin. "Elise had an accident today. She was trying to help a bird. She got a scrape, nothing serious." Tessa's face softened with concern. "Is she okay now?" "Physically, yes. But she told the school nurse something. She said she wishes you were her mom." Tessa's eyes filled with something between heartbreak and hope. "Oh, I don't want you to feel awkward," Jonathan said quickly. I thought you should know." Tessa took a breath. "Jonathan, children grieve in ways that don't always make sense to adults. She's not saying she wants to forget Melanie. She's saying she's starting to feel safe again. And safety, to a child, feels a lot like love." He nodded slowly. "I don't know how to help her, or myself." "You don't have to fix everything," Tessa said gently. "You just have to be there. Grief isn't something we solve. It's something we carry together." Jonathan looked down at his hands. They were shaking. "What if I'm not enough?" Tessa placed a hand over his. "Being enough doesn't mean being perfect. It means showing up. Every day, even when it's hard." That night, as Jonathan passed by Elise's room, he paused. Inside, he heard her voice, quiet but steady. "Tessa?" "Yes, sweetheart? Can I call you?" "Something special?" Tessa hesitated. "What do you want to call me?" Elise thought for a long moment. "Maybe Miss Tessa, Mom?" Tessa laughed softly. "That sounds perfect." Jonathan stepped away, a lump rising in his throat. Maybe healing wasn't loud or sudden. Maybe it came in small whispers, in quiet hallways, in names spoken gently at bedtime. The rooftop had once been a space for quiet dinners, decorative lights, and expensive plants Jonathan never cared about. Now, it was covered in dust and forgotten furniture. But something about it still held potential, like a blank page waiting to be filled. It was Tessa's idea. "Elise needs something to care for," she had said one afternoon. "Something alive, something growing. Grief can feel a little lighter when we're growing things." Jonathan hadn't argued. He was still learning that healing didn't always come from therapy rooms or well-worded speeches. Sometimes it came from dirty hands and sunflower seeds. So they began. Jonathan ordered a few planters. Tessa brought soil, seeds, and tiny tools that fit Elise's hands. They cleared the old space together, the three of them. Elise wore a floppy hat that kept sliding over her eyes. Jonathan rolled up his sleeves and shoveled soil like he hadn't used his hands in years. The first afternoon was quiet. They didn't speak much. They just worked. And maybe that was the magic of it. "This one is for daisies," Tessa said, handing Elise a packet. "Daisies were my sister's favorite flower." "What happened to her?" Elise asked softly. Tessa paused. Jonathan looked up, surprised by the question. Elise rarely asked about anything deeper than cartoons. Tessa sat on a low bench. "She passed away when we were young. She had an illness. I didn't know how to help her back then. I felt very small." Elise thought about that for a while. Then she said, "I feel small too." "Me too sometimes," Tessa said, reaching out to gently squeeze her hand. Jonathan kept his eyes on the soil, but his heart was listening closely. Over the next week, the rooftop changed. New colors began to bloom: marigolds, sunflowers, and forget-me-nots. Elise drew little labels on wooden sticks. Her handwriting was crooked, but full of heart. One morning, Jonathan skipped his usual office trip. Instead, he helped Elise water. "The new sprouts. This one's for Mommy," she told him, pointing at a pink rosebush. Jonathan crouched beside her. "Why pink?" "Because she wore pink when she read me bedtime stories." He swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "Then it's the perfect choice." Days turned into a rhythm. Breakfast, rooftop, stories, bedtime. Jonathan found himself saying no to more meetings and yes to more quiet moments. And then came the letter, a formal envelope with a gold-embossed logo. It was an invitation to a corporate gala in support of children's mental health. It was the kind of event Jonathan used to attend without thinking. But this time, it felt different. "You should go," Tessa said as she read the invitation. "You could bring Elise. It might be good for her to see people talking about healing out loud." Jonathan wasn't so sure. Crowds, cameras, small. Talk it all felt heavy now, but then Elise said, "Will there be flowers?" Jonathan smiled. "Probably." "Okay, then we should go." So they did. The night of the gala, Tessa helped Elise into a soft lavender dress. Her hair was tied back in a braid. She clutched a small drawing in her hand of their rooftop garden, with names next to every flower. Jonathan wore a suit that still fit, but felt tighter around the chest. Not because it was small, because his heart had gotten bigger. At the gala, the room buzzed with music and clinking glasses. Elise stayed close to Tessa, holding her hand tightly. But soon she wandered toward a corner where a group of children were drawing on a giant poster titled, "What Makes You Feel Safe?" Jonathan watched from across the room. He saw her draw a garden, 3 stick figures, and above them she wrote, "Me, my dad, and my almost mom." His chest tightened again. When they returned home that night, Elise was sleepy, her head resting on Tessa's shoulder in the back seat. "Almost Mom," Tessa said with a soft smile. "That's quite the title." Jonathan looked at her. It's something you'd want, to be more than almost." Tessa blinked, unsure if she had heard right. "I don't mean legally or officially right now," he said quickly. "I just mean Elise clearly loves you. I think I do too." Tessa looked down, brushing Elise's hair from her forehead. "You don't need to rush. Hearts don't run on clocks." Jonathan nodded. "But they know what they want." Later, on the rooftop, Jonathan watered the garden while Tessa sat nearby, watching the stars. Elise was asleep inside. "This garden," she said, "it's more than flowers. It's a promise," Jonathan agreed, "to show up, to grow something beautiful, even from broken soil." Tessa smiled. Jonathan looked up at the sky. "I think we're all learning how to bloom again." The sun had barely risen when Jonathan opened the curtains to the living room. Light spilled across the wooden floor and reached the small shoes by the door, the ones with worn-out soles from rooftop adventures and garden stories. Today wasn't just another day. It was the first time Jonathan, Elise, and Tessa would attend something together that wasn't about work or school. It was the annual Children's Healing Hearts Gala, a quiet fundraiser meant for families who had walked through loss and were still learning how to live with it. Jonathan buttoned his shirt while watching Tessa braid Elise's hair in the hallway mirror. The child sat on a stool, swinging her feet, holding her favorite sketch pad on her lap. Tessa worked slowly, carefully, like someone braiding trust into every twist. "Do you think Mommy will be proud of us today?" Elise asked, not looking up. Tessa paused for just a moment. "I think she already is." Jonathan didn't say anything, but he felt it, how far they'd come. How not long ago, they didn't talk about Melanie out loud. How now, she was part of their everyday conversations. Like the sun or the stars, always present, even when unseen. At the event, families gathered in small circles. Some wore black. Others wore bright colors, trying to fight the weight of sadness with hope. There were photo displays, memory boards, and tables covered with art made by children drawings of hearts. Clouds, angels, and gardens. Elise stood in front of a display marked "Write a Wish." The sign encouraged children to write one sentence on a paper star and hang it from the memory tree. She quietly wrote, "I wish I could tell my mom that I'm okay." Tessa knelt beside her. "You just did, sweetheart." They walked together into the main room, where round tables and twinkling lights created a soft, dreamy glow. A string quartet played near the stage. People mingled, whispered, laughed, and occasionally paused to cry. "It feels like Mommy's watching," Elise whispered. "I think she is," Jonathan replied, gently squeezing her hand. A woman in a bright red dress approached the table, smiling. She introduced herself as Claire, one of the event organizers. "This your family?" she asked, smiling at the trio. Jonathan nodded. "Yes, this is Elise. And this is..." Before he could finish, Elise piped up, "This is my mom." Tessa froze. Claire smiled even bigger. "Well, it's lovely to meet all of you." She walked away, leaving a silence behind that didn't feel awkward, just full. Jonathan turned to Elise. "What did you just say?" Elise blinked. "I said Tessa is my mom." Tessa slowly looked at her. You called me your mom." Elise tilted her head like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Well, you feel like my mom. You make me pancakes. You tuck me in. You make my heart feel full. That's what moms do." Jonathan watched Tessa's eyes fill with tears. She didn't try to hide. Elise reached up and wiped one away with her small hand. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked. Tessa shook her head. "No, honey. You said something perfect." After the event, they returned home, still wrapped in that strange glow that only comes from emotional truth. The house felt warmer, even though the temperature hadn't changed. Something had shifted. Jonathan poured 3 glasses of juice and set them on the table. Elise was already sketching again this time, a picture of her, Jonathan, and Tessa sitting together in their rooftop garden. She drew herself in the middle, holding both their hands. Tessa sat down beside Jonathan, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "That moment," she said softly, "when she called me her mom, I don't think I've ever felt anything so real." "She meant it," Jonathan replied. "And if I'm being honest, so did I." Tessa looked at him. "I mean," he continued, "you are her mom in every way that matters. And if you ever felt ready to make that official, I'd support it completely." Tessa's voice wavered. "You'd want that?" "Not just want it," Jonathan said. "I'd be proud of it." Tessa looked toward Elise, who was humming softly, lost in her artwork. "There's something about her," Tessa whispered. "Something that made me want to stay from the moment I met her. Not because she needed me, but because I needed her." Jonathan smiled. "We both did." A week later, they met with an attorney. Not to change Elise's past, but to add a new chapter to her present. At the courthouse, Elise held both their hands tightly. When the judge asked if she understood what was happening, she nodded. "I'm choosing her," she said, pointing at Tessa. "She already chose me. Now I'm choosing her back." That night, back on the rooftop, they planted a new flower. Elise picked it, a white lily for new beginnings. They sat together, their hands in the soil, hearts rooted deeper than ever. And under the stars, Elise whispered, "Good night, Mom." Tessa smiled through her tears and whispered back, "Good night, my sweet girl."